my God, I'm about to cry. I say that I'm proud of myself, and that's a really strange thing for me to say in my life. And I've done some great things in my life, but like most people will tell you, you want to feel proud. That's a branch you want to grab onto, and it's hard to grab, and I did, and I feel proud every day.
Unlost Cause is a community that shares stories of individuals 40 and beyond who found the courage to reclaim their dreams and live without regrets. I'm David New, and I hope these stories help you find joy, purpose, and passion in a life true to you. Welcome to Unlost Cause, the podcast that celebrates stories of reinvention and turning dreams that once seemed lost into powerful realities. Today, I'm excited to introduce Adam Guy, founder of I Know a Guy NYC Tours. After a 25-year career in nonprofit fundraising and marketing, Adam made a bold pivot during the pandemic to follow his passion for storytelling, New York City, and helping people connect with the magic of an incredible city. In just 2 years, Adam has built a thriving walking tour business, delivering over 190 tours and walking more than 3,100 miles, enough for him to walk from New York City, where he is, to Seattle, where I am, and carving out an amazing niche in a competitive market. Adam, welcome to the podcast. Is it okay if we start at the beginning of your wonderful journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. This will be a fun story to tell.
Great. So at the beginning of every company or every passion, there's usually like a pilot light that gets lit about, I really enjoyed doing something related to what you ended up turning a lost cause into unlost cause. Can you share with me, what was that first inspiration and when did that occur to you?
Yeah, I don't know that the inspiration was tour guiding. I know it was people. It's always been people. People's always been the light that drives me. And I had a very successful 25-year career, as you said, in fundraising and marketing, very people-centric career. But then COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And like many people, it changed our perspective on what we were doing and why we were doing it. So I had to really look closely at the why. And I lost the people because we were trapped in our apartments and we weren't going back to the office. And I really needed people because that's what I'm about. And so I took this bold leap, and I know we'll get into how that occurred a little bit in a minute. So.
Mm-hmm. And so when COVID happened, so the work that you were doing in the nonprofit world, everyone was working from home, and you didn't foresee that it was going to be back in the office where you can get into your oxygen, which is engaging with people. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were not. So I was working for a company throughout the pandemic, and yeah, we were completely isolated. They weren't going back. I actually ended up getting laid off right at the end of COVID, but stayed as a consultant for a while. And then remarkably, I got another job, which was going to be remote. And this is going to sound crazy to some people, but it was a really good job. And 6 days in, I quit. I knew something in my gut was telling me it's done. Not the organization, not the great group that I was able to join. I woke up in a cold sweat on day 6, and I said, something's wrong. I knew I had sort of ended my chapter, and that this new journey, which was going to be remote, same work, I just knew it was done. And thank goodness my wife was there, and I woke her up in the middle of the night to have this very difficult conversation. But I just had lost my light. I had lost my fire, and I needed to change. I didn't know what the change exactly was yet, but I had to leave, and I quit that day.
Yeah. So with this change that you had coming, Adam, was it like, it sounded like you had this new job, which there's obviously people are excited about a new chapter, but 6 days in, boom. Yeah. It flipped a switch. Was it something that was like, you didn't even, unbeknownst to you, it was like brewing in the background and something just like sparked it? Or
I think it was
it that caused that reaction?
Yeah. It's funny. I talked to somebody well after I changed my world. I expressed what that felt like. And he told me, he's like, you know what? You had this feeling in your gut, and the gut is a really important thing. But then the reason why you were sweating is you had that brain thing. Your brain was telling you, are you crazy? You have security. You have a really good salary. What are you doing? And that exhaustive feeling of sweating was my gut fighting my brain. And it was fear. And I guess the gut won. And, in most circumstances in life, your gut is going to win. And thank God I listened to it, because I didn't know what I was going to do the next day. Now, I did have some nuggets about this tour guiding business a little bit. I had been volunteering for 5 or 6 years with a group called the Big Apple Greeters. They're a lovely nonprofit here in New York City. And their goal is to really help people from overseas get used to New York City. So you meet them on their first day, you help them orient. It's a very complex city. For those of you who haven't been here, it's very daunting. And it's not a tour. I mean, you certainly walk them around neighborhoods, you show them how to use the subway. I loved it. I did it 20 weekends a year. That's just for free. Me walking around hanging out with strangers. But what I loved about it was the people. I immediately was magnetized to these people coming here. And my wife, when we were having this conversation, was like, the one thing that I've seen you that you've lit up in the past 5 years when you do those greets. And you sort of toured with the idea of tour guiding. Why don't you go do it? She described it pretty perfectly. She said, "You are Tigger, from Winnie the Pooh. You are Tigger, Adam. And for the last 2 years, you have been Eeyore. And if this new job isn't going to get you to be Tigger again, I don't think it's right. And I think the tour guiding thing is it. And I know you don't know what you're doing. And I know you haven't started a business before, but we're in a circumstance that will let you try. So go."
Wow.
And that's what I needed.
Yeah. And just hypothetically, if COVID did not happen, would you be doing this, or would you still be happily in the nonprofit fundraising world? Or do you think it would have sooner or later would have welled up to force you to make this pivot?
I think sooner or later, but I'll tell you what, it would have been slow and gradual, and I wouldn't have really put the effort and the commitment it needed to become this thing. I would have probably always done this little thing on the side, which I don't think would have been as fulfilling and not holistic for me. So not thank you, COVID, but thank you, COVID, because it sort of forced my hand. And again, I wasn't really stopped working. It wasn't that. I will say the hardest thing, and anyone who's done this can relate, is to go from a healthy income to zero in one day. And you go, oh my God, what did I just do? Like, that was my choice. And I did it. That's scary. That's a scary thing.
Yeah. So when you gave notice on day 6, did you immediately know what you were going to do next? Or were you just like, hey, look, this is not working for me. Let me step back a little bit, even though you like the Big Apple greeters, but did you know, or were you like, let me just take some time to sift through these emotions, the gut versus the head that you were referring to?
Yeah. So what you should know about the greeters, it's free. It's a volunteer thing. It's no one charge. So again, I was doing it all the time. I definitely panicked. I did not have a plan. I mean, I sort of had an idea for a brand. I know a guy that's very Adam Guy. It's very me. My clever marketing hat was always on. But what I did feel was, I love that experience of a greet. How can I turn that into an income generating something? How can I turn that into how do I deliver that experience? The thing is, I had to go search. So I spent the next many weeks going on tours, researching the city, looking at other websites, talking to other guides. Like, what is this world I'm about to step into? And then there was a kind of a fortuitous little moment because I stumbled upon this something called Trip School. Trip School is a tour guiding school here in New York City run by these two guys. And they just happened to have something called a boot camp, 8 weeks from my quitting day, 8 weeks. And I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. I have 8 weeks to scream and yell and sift and figure it out. And the boot camp, well, they teach you how to be a tour guide. They don't teach you how to run a business. In fact, most of what they're teaching is how to be a tour director, which is a variant on a tour guide. Those are the people who take groups around to multiple cities. Same kind of skill set for sure. But I went there looking for validation, not as much training. I got a lot of training out of it, don't get me wrong. But I said, I have this 8 weeks. And there was panic and there was stress. And then I got there and I took the boot camp, and by the end of it, I knew. I was like, I can do this. I got this. I have the skills. I may not know what the road looks like, but I'm on the right road. And that was really, really validating. Again, still a level of fear, still a level of, well, how is somebody going to find me? I know how to market. I know how to market this. This is not the same channel. How do I do this? I don't have a budget.
Yeah.
How do I do this? But I felt a little bit of validation coming out of that experience to say, okay, go.
Yeah. So I love the fact that after you decided, you gave notice, you started paddling in this direction by going to trip school, doing your research, going on trips. But I'm just curious, like, for your support network, like your friends and family, right? Were they like, are you okay, Adam? Or were they excited? Or like, what was there?
Yeah. I'm it's funny, you still call mom and dad, right?
Yeah.
I'm older, I have my own everything. But I still had to call mom and dad and be like, I'm telling you the crazy thing I'm doing. And of course, they're terrified because they just want me to be secure and have a future. And don't get me wrong, they want me to be happy and passionate but listen, they want you to have healthcare and a 401k and all those
Yeah.
things. So that was a hard conversation, but I kind of felt like I needed to do it. Not that if they said, we don't want this for you, I'm pretty independent in that regard, but I had to have that conversation. But then there was a moment where in that 8-week period, I put something on Facebook and LinkedIn. I sort of made the announcement to my friends and family, like my colleagues. And I will tell you, it probably is still today one of my most commented on posts. And every comment was, why didn't you start this earlier? This is
No
exactly who you
kidding.
are. We saw this before you saw this. Why didn't you start this 5 years ago? I want to go on your tour already. Like, I'm sending everybody I know. Like, it was this instant recognition of the person I am is the right kind of person to do this and do it well. And that affirmation, that support was just unbelievable. And to be honest, that's how some of my first tours came to be. Look, I don't care whether you start a bakery
Yeah.
or a radio station or whatever you're starting, your friends and family are going to be the people who sort of light the fuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly my first 15, 20 tours were driven around either friends, family, or people they knew.
Yeah.
And that's how the lighter lit.
Yeah. No, I love that when people say that they're going to refer people and help. And then when you jump, you're like, okay, please
Okay.
refer them. Let's go here.
And by the way, I still didn't have any really tours designed. I didn't have any, but I got cranking, and
Yeah, I bet you
yeah,
did.
I
And then
did.
you mentioned that, you woke up in a cold sweat and you immediately turned to your wife. And so I want to talk about the role of your partner or spouse in this too. It sounds like she was very in tune and said that, hey, you're Tigger, but you've been Eeyore and you need to be Tigger. So tell me a little bit about that relationship and her support, maybe tough love or soft love or whatnot. But I'm just very curious about how that turned around or turned out.
At the heart of who I am, and certainly now that I've been doing this for a while, like I am outgoing, fun loving, caring, passionate. I'm the Tigger. I'm the guy who runs around and bounces around. I bring energy to the table and I let people feed off that energy. And I
Hmm.
wasn't. She knew that not only did she want the other guy back, she knew that I needed the other guy back. So whatever that took, she was going to support. Now, we were in a situation where we could do that. She had a full-time job. She had health benefits. I don't want to dismiss the practical things of taking this leap. We weren't irresponsible, but she said, look, we're in a financial position where we can do this. I'm not saying we're close to retirement. We're going to work the rest of our lives,
Yeah.
but we can take 2 years. And if it doesn't work out, you can go back, but give it
Wow.
2 years and just see what you can build. And that might be working for somebody else. That might be working for yourself. I never really had the idea of working for somebody else, although I did for 2 months at the beginning just to test the waters. But I knew I didn't want to do that for lots of reasons. But I'm not doing this without her. I'm very responsible to my partnership, to my marriage. I've been married almost 20 years now. She's my world. She's my home. And whether we're doing this in New York or we're doing this in Seattle, where you are, we're
Yeah.
together. And so I think at the end of the day, it wasn't about money. It was about finding me again. And
Yeah.
I think she wanted that as much as I did.
And did you think that once you started doing your company, did you look back and say, oh my gosh, it was kind of taking an emotional toll on me? And sometimes when you're in the forest, when you're in the
Right.
trees, you can't see the forest, right? Where you're like, oh man, I was different. Or were you like, oh no, it's just a different gear when I'm doing something with, I know a guy NYC tour.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can only answer that in hindsight because today, 2 years later, Lemon, I am more free and more in control of my own destiny than I
Wow.
ever have been. That took a lot of ladder climbing. That took a lot of, trial and error, but it took a lot of making sure I took one step after another every day and didn't fearfully stop, even though there were days where I was like, which way do I go? And yes, there's a forest in front of me. What are the right branches to break? And what are the trees to go around? Not to stay in this metaphor,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a cloud until you start going, this feels right. And again, you write all the business plans, you write all the marketing plans. I wrote them, but at the end of the day, they're pieces of paper until you start pedaling. And then the pedaling is like, okay, here we go. It's moving. And your gut tells you a lot about what's working and what's not. And
Yeah.
some of that is feedback from clients. Some of that is if you're doing some social media, how does that responding? What do I like about it? What's getting a response? Do I need to advertise? What does that world look like? My website, I'm building it. I've never built a website. How do I walk down that road? Oh my gosh, I owe $2,000 in insurance. I need insurance? What? All those things are very real, but what you do is you go, okay, just solve that today.
Yes.
And then the next day, you'll solve the next thing. Over a few months, the pieces started to fall into place. So in hindsight, unbelievable. That clarity only came as I took baby steps.
Yeah. And as you reflect, Adam, what were the maybe two biggest barriers or obstacles that you had to overcome to turn this dream into reality?
Yeah, I two things, and this one is something I think everyone can relate to, but there's something imposter syndrome. I'm out there representing this idea that I'm this professional tour guide who only knows so much of New York City. And by the way, if you've never been here, I could learn for the next 20 years and not know all of New York City. And I'm supposed to represent it and tell these magical stories and make people interested, and they're going to pay me for that. Like, really? Like that's going to happen. So there's a lot of getting over that. And a lot of that comes with practice. It's truly practice. Like I would build tours and I don't have to write scripts, but I know the things. I would literally go around the city and verbalize them out loud. I'm the guy who's talking to himself in New York City that we make fun of, but I'm literally standing in front of the stock exchange, surrounded by people talking to myself just so I can feel good about what I'm saying and comfortable in my own words. I'd say the other thing is, how is anybody going to find me? We are the number one
Yeah.
tourist destination in America. There are thousands of tour guides, hundreds of companies, many of whom spend millions of dollars on advertising. I'm just a guy.
Yeah.
How are people going to find me enough so that I make money? Oh, and what do I charge?
Yes.
What's the right amount of money to charge? How much do I do that? If I do 50 tours, if I do 100 tours, what kind of money am I going to make? Is that even enough? All of those questions are part of this building of this fabric you're trying to do. So that is fear. That is fear of like the unknown. Even today, I'm entering year 3. I set a big goal for myself and I'm like, how are that many people going to find me? Is that real? Like, but I think so. So those are hard hurdles to jump over. And again, you got to one step at a time. And that's
Yeah.
what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it totally resonates. The imposter syndrome, the pricing, the competition, the lead
Yeah.
generation.
I just want to say the word competition, it's a funny thing. And I run into this in my world now. I'm not a big believer that there's any competition in New
Yeah.
York. I know that sounds crazy. Two things. Number one, I created my little lane. I have my lane. It's only my lane. I'm really good at my lane, and my lane is different. Number one. Number two, there are 60 million people that come to New York City every year. To the people who think there's a lot of competition, like 10% of them take tours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if the 1,000 people find me, I'm not taking your people.
Yeah.
They're finding me because of me. So I don't believe in that. And I'm a big believer in supporting everyone, my quote unquote competition or whatever. I think cooperation is a way better approach to find success.
Yeah. Well said. And then as you're preparing to make the leap and you're thinking, you mentioned you did business plan, you're thinking about, how you do your marketing, how you're doing your pricing, like how much planning went into this as you're thinking through this? You talked about you had 8 weeks before the trip school. Was that 8 weeks enough for you to be hammering away? Or tell me more about this as other people are in similar shoes, trying to learn from your experience, Adam.
Yeah, you know what? I kept it simple to start. I didn't build the freighter. I built the canoe. And then from the canoe, this is again, all this metaphor,
I love
sorry.
it.
But I didn't build a freighter. I built a canoe. And now maybe I'm on a sailboat. I may never want to build a freighter. It turns out that I kind of love the sailboat because it's just mine and I don't have employees, and maybe that'll change one day. And one day I decided to add a better sail. And one day we added a motorboat to that sail. All those things. It was this like building blocks piece at a time. And I didn't have to build it all right away. And I think that's part of the journey. I think if you rush out there, you don't have time to test it, not only for its success potential, but for, does it feel right? Does it feel good? Whatever it is. I mean, the social, the swag I'm buying. I'm buying pens and magnets.
If you think about the different segments of preparing for this pivot and the jump, you have obviously financial considerations, you have emotional considerations, you might have family considerations,
Sure.
you might, health or emotional. Like, what part of that was the most challenging?
Making sure I stayed on course. And what I mean by that is early on, you are going to doubt yourself a lot and you are going to be like, oh my God, nobody's calling. Do I need to pivot? Am I doing the wrong thing? Like I do only private tours. Why am I not doing public tours? What don't I like about them? There's money out there for public tours. I haven't gotten a call in a week. Should I be doing that? Should I be doing a very specific tour? Like all those questions and doubts that you go, but I had a really clear idea of what I wanted to do. I felt that it was very important to stay on that path for as long as I could until I learned that it wouldn't work or that it did. And fortunately, it did. The consistency has been a real measure in my ability to grow.
Yes, yes. And, I'm sure the community would be really curious, right? Because there's a healthy tension between what you mentioned, which is, hey, I'm going to drill down until either I hit water or I don't. And then the market is telling me I have to pivot and do something different, right? But if you stop too early, you hear about all those people who stopped too early and they didn't find that gold vein. But then you hear people who were like hard-headed and weren't flexible enough to pivot, right? It seems like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Like, how should people think about that trade-off and that decision making, or, how much gut, how much market signals should they take in?
I think there's a balance. I think you're 100% right. I think I listened to my customers and my customers were validating the experience I was giving them. So I knew I was touching into something that they weren't feeling on other tours. And so I knew I had something. So how do I get that feeling to be communicated, right? So I have to think about how to translate what my guests are telling me about their time with me and express it in my marketing, express it in my language. Could I do it over here? And what if I do? So I think it's checking yourself every once in a while, I think is important. And being okay to say that's not working. Maybe we try it this way a little bit, but don't panic. What's the book? Don't Panic. It comes out of the History of the World. No, not History of the World. The other one.
Got it. So
Sorry.
no, it's great. So to stick with it, but if you need to pivot, but definitely don't panic. And I think that
Don't panic.
Makes a lot of sense. So take the audience through. So you've decided to do this. You've taken trip school, and you're like, I'm going to start giving tours. Tell us about what was like the first 3 customers, if you remember, or the first few early ones. Like, how did you find them? And what was that experience like guiding them and the feedback that they were giving you? Because, this is like your dream coming true, right? So I know a lot of people remember the first few customers that they've engaged with.
Yeah, they were definitely through friends or colleagues on LinkedIn or in Facebook. And one of them was like a 1-person guy, which I was very happy to have because how badly can you mess up with 1 person?
Yeah.
No, you can't. And I definitely only limited it to the places I knew. Now I could sell that. I'd be, no, let me take you to this great neighborhood. There's a beautiful neighborhood called Brooklyn Heights. I happen to live there. So I knew it well enough, even though I still had to learn the commentary and knew it enough to do it and give that feedback. And it was nerve-wracking, but it was also exciting because what you realize is, no detriment to my customers, they're coming to me for this. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know what I'm going to show them. They don't know what I'm not going to show them. They don't know what I'm going to tell them and what I'm not going to tell them. And that gets better with time because now I know enough that I actually can listen to them throughout the day and change the tour. I don't mean drastically. I mean, you know what? This isn't the right stop for this group. Or I think they would love this one stop over here and not that stop over here because I'm now connecting the dots between what I know and what I'm listening to. Back then, I was just, can I get through this? Can I verbalize these stories in the right way? And every time I did them, I got a little bit better. If I had to go back and relearn it or rewrite it or I would do that. Yeah, those first ones were, again, the imposter syndrome thing. But I do want to emphasize one point that's important. And there was a little thing that sort of came out of trip school, which was important. The skills are one thing, the storytelling are one thing. And this is a little bit of a Simon Sinek thing, if you know him. But it's the why. You gotta, I mean, I think that's one thing that has grounded me throughout these 2.5 years was the reason I'm doing this isn't because I want to be a tour guide. I know that sounds like a crazy thing. I am a people connector and collector. And I don't mean that in a Hannibal Lecter kind of way, right? I mean, I love connecting with people and finding way. The tours are the way I do that. It's also why I don't give 90-minute tours. It's not enough time for me. It's also why I don't give tours with 50 people. I can't remember their names. I want to remember their names. I want to create meaningful time and meaningful moments. Tours are the way I do that. And thank goodness my best partner is New York City. Because, man, you show them that skyline, you walk that Brooklyn Bridge, That's my best friend right now because
Yeah.
you bring someone on that and you light up, and I get to watch them light up. We get to light up together. We get to talk and make jokes and connect. That is why I do this every day.
Yeah, so you mentioned the first few customers were from that LinkedIn post that was highly effective for you.
Yeah.
And then you only do private tours and you don't do things less than 90 minutes because you want to connect and not too many people so you know their name. So can you walk us through like what is like a typical tour? Is it 2 hours, 3 hours, and how many people go on it? Yeah, what's that texture like?
Sure, sure. So I only do private tours and I do neighborhood tours. So generally I don't take people to things that require tickets or paid admission. My logic is I can't get you up the Empire State Building any faster. We're all going to wait in line. So don't use your time for me. I
Mm,
do half day tours, which are 3.5 to 4 hours, or full day tours. And occasionally somebody will get me for 2 days. If somebody wants me for 3 days, sometimes I resist because part of what I believe my job isn't just to give you a tour. It's to help you feel comfortable in the city. I want to teach you the city. How do you ride the subway? How do you navigate? Because I'll tell you, after you leave with me, if you have that confidence, you're going to love the city even more. And my ultimate goal is for you to love the city. So if after 2 days with me, you are like, we got here, and I get texts all the time. You'll be so proud of us. We got all the way up to the Upper West Side and we didn't get lost. Like, there's a really heartfelt moment. So it's half days, full days, but my tours don't start on the first day. Usually when someone inquires with me on my website, I don't list, here's my 4 hour tour of Brooklyn, here's my 4 hour tour of the West Side. I list a bunch of neighborhoods and I have a conversation with every single guest before they come. And we plan the day. And what I mean by that is most people coming to New York have no idea. They have a list, they've Googled things to do in New York. It is overwhelming. And so my job is to help them make sense not only of the day that we're going to spend together, but maybe the 3 or 4 days they're going to be like, let me help you build that and let's back into a plan where using my time for you is smart. Like it's hard to navigate the financial district and you're not going to know what things are. So let me take you there. Or boy, you may want to walk the High Line or Greenwich Village. You're going to get lost. Let me take you there. They're magical. So I'm really thinking about that. Or you know what? Your 13-year-old daughter loves Taylor Swift. Let's make sure we include a spot that I know that's related to Taylor Swift. Or they saw this bakery on TikTok. We have to go to this bakery. Well, we're going to build something that makes sense. Now, I do some of the same neighborhoods all the time because I know that people fall in love with them.
mm.
And I know that experience is authentic every time.
Yeah, yeah,
But that's what I do. And so by the time they're done with a first call with me, they have an entire plan. They know what they're going to do with me.
yeah,
We have trust. We have a connection. So by the time they get here, we're not strangers.
yeah.
We're friends meeting. So
Got it. And did you say usually it's around 3 to 4 hours, the one?
yeah, 3 to 4 hours. And the group size, I average about four per person, usually families. I'll do couples, I'll do four. I did a group of 8 the other day, 8 ladies who were here as like a big girls trip. Get a lot of girls trips. The biggest group I've done was really 15. I've done a couple little smaller or bigger groups for corporations. But my general rule of thumb is if I forget your name, then I'm not doing it for the same reason. I know that sounds cliche, but I want to say, Carol, did you have a great time? Peter, what did you think of the bridge? Not you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That personal thing is how memories are made.
Yeah. And then what about age? Is it like as long as you can walk from a child to
Yeah,
a grandparent, you're good to go?
I'm good. I mean, we have those conversations at the beginning too. And I really think about the neighborhoods or the places we go. If I have a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, I need to think about how I tell my stories. I need to think about which neighborhoods are the right ones for them. I need to make sure there's a candy store or a carousel. But, and then same thing with seniors. We talk about mobility sometimes. And every once in a while, I have to pass on a tour because they really need a vehicle. I don't do vehicles. And that's just my choice. There's also a really expensive thing in New York City, but I'm always thinking about what's right for them.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's why we have the conversation.
No, that's wonderful. It sounds like I'm very impressed that you have boundaries as you're thinking about your
Yeah.
niche, right? Hey, I'm not doing vehicles. I'm not doing paid tickets. So how did you start identifying like your swim lane that you talk about that's unique to you and versus all these other potential things that can be added on?
Yeah. I mean, I got all the advice. Why aren't you selling? Why aren't you doing Empire State Building? You can mark up the tickets. Why aren't you doing Statue of Liberty? Why aren't you? I just think there's a lot of ways to do those. And if you're going to really be with me, it has to be meaningful time. And that's really important to me. I also wanted to keep it simple. When you start getting into multiple ticketing and multiple things with transactions, you're buying things, there's refunds, there's cancellations. I'm a one person shop. One, I didn't want the burden to. Like, so for example, let's say somebody does the Empire State Building with me. And then look, I've been up with a family to the Empire State Building. But what happens if they change the date? I can't move the tickets. And then we have to have that uncomfortable conversation of you lost the money or they're going to expect me to refund them. And I have no way. And I want to keep things on the positive. Now, what I will help you do is let me talk to you about all the skyscrapers and what are the best ones and how you should book and what are the best ways to do it. And here's the day I think you should do it. And should you book in advance or not? Let's talk about that. So I'm going to set you up for success. Statue of Liberty is a great example. Look, I don't do tours. Occasionally I will, but it can be a 5-hour day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to the 8-year-old, all they want to do is say, "Hey, Lady Liberty, you look great." They don't need the 5 hours. So what are the other ways they can experience the statue, either with me or, a special boat tour that they sell? So we're going to have that conversation about what's the right experience. And I just knew that I wanted to keep it simple for myself, which keeps it simple for the guests. Like New York and many cities have those multiple attraction passes. Those are great. They're complicated.
Mm-hmm.
If I showed you the list of them, you'd be like, yeah, this is like spider web, so.
No, I think that's great advice to keep it simple. And there's, I think, a lot of practical reasons. Like
There
people
are.
might just think about the revenue, but they don't think about the refund, maybe the transaction charges, the date changes, it's closed. So I think you really put a lot of thought into it and it
I
wasn't
did.
willy-nilly.
No, not at all. No. And I thought about all that stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm in this. I need to make a living. But again, back to my why is I have to connect with the people. And if I'm going to put any of that at risk by complicating this,
Yeah.
then I'm just the guy selling a thing. I don't want to be this guy. I want to be the guy, just not the guy selling the thing.
Yeah. So now that you've delivered nearly 200 of these walking tours.
That was just last year.
Oh, that's just last year. Okay.
Last year. Oh, no. Yeah.
Hundreds of these walking tours,
Yeah.
racking up thousands of miles. What surprised you the most on this journey you've been on thus far?
I have a lot of great stories. In fact, if you follow me along on social media, I actually write the stories. I write stories of all of my guests if they allow me to. And sometimes they're really meaningful. Sometimes they're just silly, right? I think the thing that really gets me is just this overwhelming sense of joy and togetherness that I can help people feel by the end of our time together. I'm flattered every time somebody says to me, "Our time with you is the best part of New York." Like,
Wow.
that fills my cup. And it's not because I walked the Brooklyn Bridge with them. That was the landscape to do it. But we had time together. We laughed and they shared. And I think that's a really important thing that I try and bring to every tour. And I think something that I undervalued when I went into this, but now I think very conscious of. And I'm not saying I gripped any. I am always making sure we are having conversations that I don't get political and we don't get religious. We talk about life. We talk about kids and school. And with kids, I'm like, I do some silly games when I have like brothers and sisters when I'm trying to connect with them because I want them to know I'm not like scary adult, right? So I'm like, all right, Janie and Sarah, which one has the messier bedroom? And like that starts a fun conversation and mom's laughing and dad's laughing or little Joey, you play basketball? That's amazing. Which one's better right now? Your slam dunk or your 3-pointer? Right. So silly conversations that create smiles. Again, it's back to the people. I keep sort of circling back to that. The walk across the bridge is amazing. Then we have the time in between, and that matters just as much. And I really think about the time in between.
Yeah. I'm curious because your energy is infectious and I can feel it, right? So I
Yeah.
imagine in person, it's even more radiant. So I'm curious, like sometimes when I speak on stage, I prep, and then I do my song and dance. And then afterwards, I'm just like emotionally exhausted. I'm like, oh man, I left it all out there, even though it might have only been like 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And for you, do you leave after one of these walking tours? Are you like, oh, I'm emotionally spent, I need to recharge? Are you like, oh, that was great, I can't wait to go on the next one?
I'm the latter. I mean, yeah. And after 8 hours with somebody, 9 hours, you would think
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's not days I'm tired, but man, that is the fuel. Like if there's a spectrum of introvert, extrovert, and extroverts over here, I'm over here, like 100%. I think the only time I get worn out was when I have 6 or 7 days in a row of all day. That's just a physical challenge. But yeah, it's the people that fuel me. I love I have this little technique, and it's not a manufactured thing. It's authentically me, and that's kind of what I love about it. I walk into every conversation like we're already friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally, I'll be like, I'll already start making jokes within the first 3 or 4, like, engagements because I want that healthy energy to be pulled out. I don't wanna waste any time having to build that house with them. I want the house to be there. Again, we're back to metaphor. Sorry. So I need that energy. I mean,
Yeah.
and I feed off the energy, and sometimes I get quiet groups, and boy, it brings me down, and I got to figure out a way to ratchet that maybe another way, or turn it into a game or something that's going to just pivot that. Because, if you just walk around following me, then you're on a tour. You're not an I know a guy tour.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not the
yeah.
same
You're not
thing.
on. Yeah,
Then
definitely.
I should have the flag and the microphone.
Oh my
That's what then
goodness.
then I'll do that, right?
Yeah. So in terms of like some of the lessons learned for other people who want to, thinking about jumping and, following a passion or starting a cafe, I think you mentioned that a little bit earlier, is like, what have been some of the biggest kind of learnings that you've had thus far? Or, said another way, if you had to go back in time and start over, like, what would you tell yourself? Like, whisper at them, like, here's some tips.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could have started putting my toe in the water, even though I did the Big Apple grader thing a lot earlier. Like, I could have spent more time learning the history and the stories. I like them. Why didn't I bother to sort of learn them? I take people around all the time, even just friends and family. I would have built more confidence earlier on. I think meeting with tour guides, meeting with companies, and doing a lot of research more early on. Obviously, the leap was happened because I got out of this job. And so it was like, bam, here we go. And that was fearful. If I even knew there was a kernel there, I would have started sowing that seed a lot earlier. Doesn't mean I had to build a company, but I could have really talked to a bunch of my friends and be like, what do you think of this idea? What should I be doing? If I were going to do it this way, what do you think? I would have taken a whole lot more tours before. What do I like and not? I did a lot after I made this decision, but it would have really been nice to sort of build a longer ramp. But I guess the other advice is don't spend all your time building the ramp. At some point, you have to walk.
Yeah, yeah.
And at some point, you have to run. And as fearful as that is now, don't run stupid. Meaning, if I weren't in a situation where I could have done it, if I was entirely month to month, and I'm not saying I'm not, I have to pay my mortgage. If I were in a situation where I was desperate for money, you don't take the leap. You do it on the side. You spend all that time building it so that you don't have that loss in income. You got 3 kids. Listen, you're in a different situation. So
Yeah, yeah. No,
you have
I
to still walk smartly.
Okay, so you just brought up something which I think a lot of people discuss, right? Which is, do you do a side hustle first to kind of pressure test it before you jump and, benefits and all that goes away? And I think what you're sharing is you had the benefit of a partner or spouse who had this really stable income,
Yeah.
understanding, and said, hey, I'm going to give 2 years to figure this out because I want Tigger and not Eeyore, right?
Yeah.
So if you didn't have that, do you think you would have gone side hustle first, or
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do. I mean, I sort of built the brand before all this went down. I didn't do anything with it because I had to work. It's hard to do a 40-hour, 60-hour week job in COVID, and when you're done with work, you're in the same room. So you didn't really have the motivation to go do it. But yeah, I think side hustles are a pretty healthy way to invest in yourself, invest in the experience without throwing the entire oar in the water. And I think that's a really good thing. And I think that eliminates some of the fear. I do have some people, I've been doing a lot of meeting with people now who understand my story and they want to meet with me. And, they have full-time jobs. I'm like, great, go build one. Go take your friends on that tour. See what you feel. How do you feel about that? Then go take another group of two and then maybe offer it through a platform. See how it goes. Like, get comfortable walking that road for a while. And if you feel like it feels like the right thing, and then you can have a plan to get there, then do it. Yeah. I mean, I think the side hustle thing's great. As long as the reason you're doing the side hustle isn't money.
Yeah, I mean,
There are
clearly,
lots of money side hustles. Those aren't
yeah,
the
yeah,
ones
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, clearly it's not for you because you were volunteering and doing these tours prior to it. And I know a lot of people say, do what you love. And clearly this is something that you love. And if you're able to make income to support your lifestyle, even better. And I think that a lot of people sometimes when they're thinking about turning a lost cause into unlost cause, they get really strung up financially because of the pros and cons of that. And I think you've just highlighted a path, which is like, well, you can do a side hustle, take one step at a time and do it with a friend, do it with 2 people, 3 people, and see how that's going, because then that gives you kind of those market signals if that's a right pathway or not.
I agree. I let you test the waters. I'll also say this, like I've pretty much committed. I sort of mentioned I don't want to build the freighter. I don't want to build the massive tour company with 50 people. It's just not what I want because I think I would lose the reason why I'm doing this. And I think some people want to have that and build the big enterprise. I think that's great. If that's what you want, I also recognize my brand doesn't lend itself to that. So I
Yeah,
chose
unless
I
you hire
I
guys.
chose I know a guy. You either have to hire somebody with the last name of
Yeah,
guy
yeah,
or and you really at this point people are finding me for me, which is
yeah.
flattering, but I couldn't ask anyone else to do what I do for my clients, which is well beyond the tour, which is well beyond the consultation. Like I make welcome kits for every single one of my groups that is at the hotel
No
when they
way.
arrive. So there's a really some personal touches. I couldn't pay someone to do that. But honestly, without doing that stuff, then it's not an I know a guy experience. Now, if I wanted to build something at scale, and that's my business folks talk to me about that all the time. My only real option is I know a guy Chicago, I know a guy Cleveland, and then you have to find the right identity of someone who can embody those same ideals. I could have done is be like nycwalkingtours.com, which could have opened itself up to whatever it wants to be, but it's not who I am. So
No, and I think it brings back that fable or story where like this person talks to someone who's like they're like fishing in Mexico or something like, oh, your tacos are the best in the world. Why don't you like start franchising and then you make a lot of money and then you have a private jet and then you retire and then you're fishing in Mexico and he's like, well, I'm already doing what I love, right? So
right.
exactly.
There's these guys actually. I stop at this place on my tours in Greenwich Village. They own a locksmith shop. It's been around since 1980. It's this 140 square foot little just locksmith shop. It's run by a father and a son, and they have been offered millions of dollars for this little stand because it's on 7th Avenue. It's a pretty prime location, and I've talked to them, and they don't want to sell it. They love working together. They love what they do. Like they're very content and listen, you can't put a price on that. Like they've been offered millions. I get the lure, and listen, someone offered me millions. I'm fine, but but uh, there is a price. But that contentment. Again, I said I've never felt more free or in more control of my life than I ever have. Like, and I'm not saying there aren't stresses, but I'm only accountable to me. My
Yeah.
success is entirely up to me.
Yeah. And that's so lovely because who doesn't want more freedom or, joy in what they do, right? Like, what we all want for ourselves and our loved ones and our kids and, friends. So that's fantastic. And so I want to transition a little bit. And I know that, it takes a village to turn a lost cause into unlost cause, right? And so I want to talk about the resources because I think by you sharing the resources that you were able to tap into, it might help a listener put one foot in front of the other, right? So let's start out first with role models or mentors, right? Did you have any role models or mentors? I know you talked about this Trips NYC class that you've done. Were there any other people who really influenced you?
Yeah, so a couple guys in there were good. I also took one of their entrepreneurship classes, and so there was a guy named Don Littlefield who was definitely a business mentor in a child extent. He's built several tour companies and franchised them, so knows how this works. Funny thing is what I found is I didn't need Don for the business advice. What I needed Don for was to be able to pick up the phone and say, Don, am I crazy? Because when you were on this little island by yourself and you're sort of putting blocks in place and you have no one to like bounce that off of. So Don would be like, oh, that makes sense. Think about this though, too. So he would always give me some sage advice. And he would tell you that I didn't take 90% of his advice, but again, he didn't know my lane. And so to
Yeah.
all the fairness,
Yeah.
but every time I had a success or every time I had a failure, I could call him. And so having that person to be a sounding board was huge. I'll say this, that my friends and family who got me some of those first gigs are still getting me gigs. And then my customers have become my fans. And that's a weird thing because who's a fan of me? Like it's a weird idea, but that's sort of a social media concept. It's not followers you want fans. And I'm so grateful that people are like, we tell everybody about you. Now, the I know a guy thing is very effective in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody's going to New York, they say, I know a guy. So I do lean on them too. It's weird to say I lean on my customers. I don't even call, by the way, I never call them customers. I call them my guests. They're my guests.
Mm-hmm.
The language is important. I did certainly lean on some past bosses too, mostly to say, again, there's a little bit of, can you do this? Because when you have that imposter syndrome, when you have that, no one's going to step in and write your business plan. You don't want them to.
Yeah.
No one's going to step in and tell you how to market. By the way, everybody is going to tell you how to market. Everyone's like, you need a podcast, you need to write books, you need to do. By the way, all of those are great ideas and they're all their own enterprises. I'm sure you know by launching a podcast, it's a whole thing. And you take all their advice, you grab onto the ones that really make sense. But the cheerleading as a whole is a lot of support.
Yeah.
And I
So,
can't underestimate. It's not always specific. It's always like the you can do this thing is real.
yeah. And so what I'm hearing, if I'm playing that back at him, is like you had this one mentor who had done some of these tours, but what was more important than the business advice, since you didn't follow 90% of it, was the emotional support because they talk
Yeah.
about it's lonely at the top, right? And if one is a solo entrepreneur or starting this journey, by definition, they're either solo or maybe they have a co-founder, but
Yeah.
who do you talk to about these
Who
different
do you
things?
talk
And
to?
it sounds like you found someone in your tribe to connect with.
I did. And there are some other guides too. I did meet with lots of other guides, mostly to talk about the nature of giving a tour, the nature of how people respond. See things like tipping and some practical things and what about this venue and what do we do about this? So there were some learnings along the way from colleagues. I definitely have some tour guide friends who none of whom necessarily do it the way I do it, but listen, they've been through the road. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to listen to them. And then of course, in due turn, anyone who comes to me, I'm happy to offer anything I've learned.
Yeah.
But what I always say to those people is, my road's not your road. Even if you built the same road, you're not me.
Yeah.
So find you, whatever find you. And I think that's really important. In fact, I met with a guy recently, super nice guy, similar, I could see in demeanor, likes my model. I'm like, go do my model. Because
Mhm.
anyone finding you is going to find you for you.
Yeah.
We're not like duplicating us.
Yeah.
So
Adam, I also know in terms of like the, resources, our tax dollars pays for the Small Business Administration, and they have these things called SBDCs or Small Business Development Centers, and they have SCORE mentors. Did you avail yourself of any of those resources or none of them? I'm just
yeah,
curious.
I was aware of a lot of them. Like number one, I didn't need a small business loan. I wasn't putting up too much capital. I mean, that was kind of an advantage of doing what I do is I didn't need storefront. A website's not that expensive. They have a bunch of programs through the city of New York that are all these online classes. It became a little bit of a choice of time.
Mm,
And I guess fundamentally for me, and I said I did really well in school, but I am a learn by doing guy. I just know I am. And so taking online classes weren't going to get me where I'd rather sort of put the bricks in place. And if they didn't work, realign the bricks myself. Like I am a learn by doing guy. In my last worlds, like I was known for execution. I could build a strategy, but man, could I get it done. And the getting it done for me is how I learn. I didn't take advantage of it. They were there. I know they were there. The Small Business Administration in New York is really strong. They want you to be successful, but they're thick and there's a process to it and it's all online learning and you get in what you put out. So you got to put a lot in to get a lot out. And really at that point, it turns into time. Do I want to spend
yeah. Yeah.
10 hours a week slogging through that? Wasn't my style.
Got it. Got it. What about other resources like books or podcasts or conferences that you could recommend to the readers and then the listeners, and I could put that in the show notes?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's about 1,000 history books on New York. Well, that's for that. But there's certainly some resources, a lot of websites too, how-tos. I do watch other people's videos. There's a ton of tour guides who are giving online tours. Not that you ever copy their styles, but by any means. In fact, there's some really good ones. I met with one of them. He's a stand-up comedian. He's great. And he actually met with me. I said, I like what you do. I want, can you talk? He was kind enough to meet with me and talk to me. I've seen him do stand-up. I'm super kind. But what you learn from those is, oh, that's how their style is. So I think you learn by modeling, not necessarily to mimic, but to understand this person's way of approaching a story is this, or this person's way in carrying on information is that, or I am not someone who's great on camera, even though I'm good on camera. I'm on camera right now, but that's not who I am. I think YouTube is an amazing resource for this stuff. Now, what you don't want to do is use that as your source for everything. Let's say you're learning about, a certain building. YouTube's great, but so are the websites and so are the books and so are the going there and taking the tour. So there's that. Yeah, and then I did have the trip school thing, which was really helpful. So, and I am part of the Guides Association, which is a group that exists for all tour guides. So sometimes you get some good things out of there as well. I don't think there's a definitive anything in this. I mean, there's no how to build a tour business book.
Not yet.
There actually, you know what? There is a really good one actually called Turning Lookers into Bookers.
Oh,
That a guy named
catchy.
Torres or Peter. Oh God, I should know. So he is a part of a group that runs Tourpreneur. Tourpreneur is a website and a podcast. The guy, one of the guys from Trip School, funny enough, is in. So there is a big community out there of tour operators who do want to share information. So I tap into that sometimes. There are
Okay.
Facebook groups and interactive things, and then but it also becomes a labyrinth.
Yes.
And so you again, there's a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down sometimes. Like, and the Bowery Boys is a great podcast. They're well known for New York stuff. I listen to them sometimes, but sometimes I'm like, I got 20 minutes. I can't do the hour. So there's that. I think I piecemeal things together. There's some really well known research. Again, the Bowery Boys for podcast, Tourpreneur. Tourpreneur is great if you're like, I want to start a business. I need to. Who knows tour guiding that can help me build a website?
Mm-hmm.
What's the right booking software? All that stuff that you don't know going into it. A resource like Tourpreneur is really good for that.
Okay.
And yes, there are conferences. There are myriad of conferences around the world, actually. So,
Any favorites that you want to mention?
well, I've only been to ones here because I need to stick to the ones that are relevant to my business. There are certainly ones all around the world that are. There's one called Arrival. Spoke at one this year called TripCon. It was in New York, so that worked out well. There's ITDG, which is the International Tour Guide Directors, something, something. So they exist. Again, it's a little bit of why I freaked out for the first 8 weeks because the world is big. I didn't know that I was walking into, it's not like I'm just walking into Major League Baseball. There's 30 teams in one league. It is the world of sports.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you begin?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's big. And I didn't know that. You keep chipping away at what makes sense for you.
Yeah. So, Adam, as you reflect on turning a dream into an unlost cause, how has this changed your perception of how you see yourself?
Yeah. I mean, wow. I mean, I walk with a lot more confidence than I ever have. I feel really joyful a lot, and I get joy from giving joy. And I think that's really important. I do spend way more time on this than I ever thought I would. You think, yeah, I'm sometimes working till 11 or 12 o'clock at night, like stuffing envelopes and, logging tours. But it's not like I feel like when I used to do that for my other companies, where it's like, oh God, I work till midnight and they're not paying me enough.
Yeah.
It's all me. So there's something fulfilling about it. I struggle to take enough days off because frankly, when the tours come, I don't know when the next one's coming. So I'll take the tours, but I'm getting better about that. But I feel really good. Like I feel really whole
Yeah.
as a person. I feel very purposeful.
Wow.
I feel like I'm in the right lane now. And we threw the dream out there. I don't know if this is my dream, but I can tell you the feelings are the best I've felt. And I think that, in 5 years, will my heart change a little bit? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there'll be some other passion. I think that's okay. We're not built in this world to do one thing.
Yeah.
But I'm thrilled that I took the leap. I'm actually proud of myself. Oh my God, I'm about to cry. I say that I'm proud of myself, and that's a really strange thing for me to say in my life. And I've done some great things in my life. But like most people will tell you, you want to feel proud. That's a branch you want to grab onto, and it's hard to grab. And I did, and I feel proud every day.
Yeah, I think as for high achievers and people who have the bravery to be an entrepreneur, they don't take enough time to take a step back and give them the permission to be proud. It's almost like, oh, I accomplished this. What's the next thing I have to do? Like you mentioned, you have huge goals for 2025, right? But I'm glad we're having this conversation now so that you can reflect and be proud because that's what you've done is amazing. And I know that this will inspire countless numbers of people who listen to this. And, one of my follow-up questions is, what has this journey been like? We talked about how you see yourself differently, but what about for your family or friends or people in the community? Do they notice like what's the impact been on them or how they perceive you?
Yeah, I mean, I get feedback daily. I mean, I call my friends, I call my colleagues, like tour guests still call me. I mean, the social media world's really helpful with that because I stay in touch with my guests that way. My dad comments on every single post that I do, so I know he's proud of that, which is, he doesn't know how to use Facebook very well, but he's on there. So yeah, I mean, I think people see the joy. And what's good is I'm sort of in stage 2 of my career, right? And so it's not about the climbing. I think once you get to a certain stage in life, it's not about becoming the VP or the SVP or the C this or the C that. And I've got lots of friends who are that level. I think everybody now just wants you to find that thing. And so that's the resounding feedback I'm getting is like, you just look so happy doing this. And it's not a jealousy thing. I don't think so. I mean, I'm not saying some aren't, but I think it's really just like, good for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not about how much money you make at all. I mean, I'll never be a millionaire doing this, but I'm doing well.
Yeah.
And that's all I need. I think I love that people are just excited for me. You want those people and you want to give that back, by the way.
Yeah.
You don't just want to let it be about you. It's, well, how can I help you find this? Like,
Yeah.
how can I help you find this thing, whatever that thing is? Cause man, it is like drinking gold, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, every once in a while I'll put up a post like I did an end of year post this year just to thank all my guests. And I mean, hundreds of people are commenting on this thing like, good for you and what an amazing, and boy, your feet must hurt, right?
Yeah.
I get that, right? I walked 7 million steps last year. That's a lot. And then they were like, Hoka, sponsor me. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Hoka, please call. I would take the call.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I think that's part of this is
mhm.
that resounding sense of like, good for you, man.
Yeah. And, on the flip side, if you were kind of like on your last few breaths or on your deathbed and you didn't take this leap, how do you think you would feel?
Like I missed something.
Yeah.
I was either too afraid or caught up in the world of security, of being secure all the time and feeling really unfulfilled. I mean, again, I was doing magical work with some other things too. So I don't want to dismiss that. Amazing causes like Boys and Girls Clubs of America, helping kids go to summer camp, kids with serious illnesses, things like that for another cause. So there was purpose always behind it. But like, this is chapter 2. I'm glad to have had it. And I'm glad that I'm in it. And I might have a chapter 3. Who knows?
Knowing you, I certainly think there might be a 3 and a 4, right?
But I got a lot. I got a lot of chapter 2 to go. In
Yeah,
fact,
there
I
you
got some.
go.
I got to call it in a little while for another tour guest. So I'm excited by that. So
Unbelievable. And for someone who's listening who has a simmering dream, right? What's one step that they could take to get closer to making that a reality, or advice that you would give them?
yeah, I mean, this may manifest itself in a couple of ways for whoever it is. Get on a whiteboard, write it down. Or get on a piece of paper and just write, imagine myself doing this. You know what? If you want to become a chef, great. Go take a couple cooking classes and see how that feels. And then see if you can turn those recipes at home into what you did in the class without the teacher. And then can you go find another recipe? And then how does that feel? And then what kind of chef do you think you want to be? Is it a private chef? Is it a restaurant chef? What does that world look like? Like, go start hammering a few nails around before you go build the house. I think it is literally action. It is about action. I'm a big believer in there's words and there's actions, and words don't mean much until you take the action. So actions are everything. I said in my last world, I'm an executor, getting things done. And it's not like producing results. It's the inertia thing.
Yeah.
One foot in front of the other. I think that is most people's fear of, I don't know what's ahead. Yeah, I didn't know what was ahead either, but
No,
I put one step.
Yeah, Adam, I think that mindset is so important, right? I think a lot of
Yeah.
people have a victim mentality sometimes, and they don't know that they have agency, right? There's excuses. I'm too old. I'm too overwhelmed, or I can't do this, right? And I think having that mindset, and, we talked about that metaphor, Eeyore and Tigger, and having that positivity, and what you're saying really resonates with me, like one step at a time, figure out, I've got a canoe, I can figure this out. Or
Yeah.
you had the luxury of jumping in. Other people, you recommend, hey, do a side hustle, see if you can get something started. So
I've heard some ideas. I've heard like Stephen King who write about or read talk about this. I've heard Lin-Manuel, same advice. The Hamilton writer. He's like, how do you get started in writing? And they're both like, write. Put words on the page, even if it's gibberish, even if it's whatever, is write and then write again and then write again and then write again. And it becomes habit and it becomes something than just a task. And I think that's the same thing as putting a step forward,
yeah.
one step at a time. Like, do it.
Mhm.
Don't just talk about doing it. And that is a hard thing for people to do sometimes. And I understand it, by the way.
Yeah. Since we're a community and we're in this together, what ask do you have of the Unlost Cause community and the audience who is listening?
Yeah. Root for your friends, root for your family members. Like, even if some of the things that they think are crazy and dreams is, if they're really passionate, root for them. You don't have to pull them. You shouldn't have to do that. If they don't want to pull themselves, you can't pull them. Don't do that. But man, encourage them. And by the way, it's okay to give a little feedback. Like, this feels right for me. Like, I can see you doing this, or I'm not sure you're going to like this, but like, be in their corner, really be in their corner, because it doesn't have to be your dream for you to want to have them chase their dream. That's fine. You don't have to tell them how to do it. You don't have to give them all the ideas. You just have to be like, I believe in you, and I'm here when you're failing, and I'm here when you're having your success. I'll be there both times
Wonderful.
because I'm here.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
So, Adam, your story is incredibly inspiring. If our audience wants to support or connect with you moving forward, what's the best ways to find you online or schedule a tour?
Yeah, so I have a website, which is iknowaguy.nyc, not .com.nyc. But I'm also reachable on Facebook. Again, I Know a Guy NYC, and Instagram. Those are my two primary platforms. And actually, they're fun to follow. I've been told they're fun to follow. I write stories of all my guests, some meaningful ones, some funny ones, and also some really great content about New York that you may not know. And I just have a funny writing style, I think. So they're enjoyable. But those are really the best places to find me. And I put my phone number on there. So if you're like, you want to text me, I'll take the text. I'm good. If I'm on a tour, I'll let you know. But I'm pretty responsive to everything. I'm in a personal business. You're going to connect with me when you reach out. There is no other person. My cat doesn't know how to do emails. So, it's me you're getting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for sharing your journey with us. You've shown that it's never too late to turn a lost cause into an unlost cause and pursue your dream. We're excited to see how many more memories and impact I Know a Guy NYC tours impacts in the years moving forward. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks so much, David.
Before you go, if you're inspired and want to be a part of something bigger, subscribe, like, and share to help more people reclaim their dreams and live true to themselves. Also, let me know if you or someone you know would be an inspiring guest on this show. Together, let's spark courage to live without regrets. The Unlost Cause way, one story and one person at a time.